Why do Americans say they aren't having kids because of economic hardships, but their counterparts in poorer countries are having kids? Make no mistake, poor folks are still having kids in America. It's middle-class Americans and up that are opting out of child-rearing. And many wealthy folks are still having kids because they are insulated from economic impacts anyway. The not having kids phenomenon is a sentiment shared by a very specific subset of people, the precarious, socioeconomic middle, where the precarity of a child can plunge you deep into poverty quickly. Some of it probably has to do with the availability of birth control. But another factor might be the difference in the cost of living and the average lifestyle in the US vs in poorer countries. Like, married couples in the US are generally expected to live as a nuclear family, i.e. in their own home with just themselves and their kid, which means that unless they can afford to have one person be a stay-at-home parent, and these days most people can't, they have to pay for childcare, which is fucking expensive. In countries where it's more normal for people to live with extended family, even if it's out of financial necessity and not by choice, it's a lot more likely that the kid will have grandparents or aunts and uncles who can watch them when their parents can't be at home. In agrarian societies, children are free labor. As societies urbanize, children become liabilities in the immediate, short, medium, and foreseeable long term. Birth rates tend to decline as societies urbanize. Because in America, once you have a kid, you are 100 on your own. My stepmom is from Nigeria, and when her sister had kids, she cared for them 90 of the time while her sister worked. We don't have a village or community in America. Boomer grandparents aren't interested in helping with childcare the way their parents did. They don't want to live like people do in poorer countries. Number of children is actually negatively correlated to income, meaning the more economically prosperous you are, the less likely you are to have children. This will differ slightly on region and demographics. However, many studies support this finding. This is going to sound not very nice, but I genuinely believe it's because America at least has a history of a solid middle class, so people have expectations around what a decent living should look like. If they can't meet that, then they won't have kids. In other, poorer countries, however, the quality of life has always been so terrible that people don't realize what should be. Cost like $30,000 in US to have a baby in a hospital. Daycare is like $20,000 a year. Add all the other crap to live comfortable, and it's hardly worth it. Having a kid in other countries probably doesn't automatically add $2,000 more to your budget for daycare and health insurance increases. Off the top of my head. The poor, and sometimes uneducated, don't really care and have kids anyway. It's the not so poor but kinda close to poor that aren't having kids. They are educated to know that having kids would make them poorer. They also have a lifestyle they want to have. And there's not much welfare for the general Americans. Well, first, whether your country has a living wage is not related to how poor your country is. What's important is the difference between what things cost and what you earn, not the fact that both are low. Second, somebody in a richer country is going to have higher standards they expect. If it's normal for a child not to have an education in a poor country, obviously parents are not going to let that stop them having kids. In a rich country, it would be considered outrageous. It's especially important when living standards have dropped significantly within a single generation. So you have people whose children would have worse living standards than their parents. Hardly something a normal person is going to happily accept. It's been expected for hundreds of years that your children should have a better life than you did, and you would consider yourself to have failed if you didn't manage that. The system is now rigged to take that out of your control. You are being set up to fail your children. In a poor country, children are free labor. In the USA, children are each a $250,000 bill for the parents to pay cost to raise child. So 4 kids is putting you $1 million in debt. Probably in other countries, kids are seen as a way to possibly improve living standards due to less child labor laws and kids being able to work early. In the US, kids are an extreme liability financial-wise, as they provide no possible impact on finances other than draining them even into adulthood. Lower standards, and the fact that in less socially sophisticated countries, children are the only pension and nursing home system. I don't know, I say I don't want kids because I don't want kids. We have access to birth control. Because we make better choices due to higher education, and knowing that it's irresponsible to bring a child into the world that we are unfit to take care of in this economy. The highest birth rates in the US are from the poorest families. www.statista.com statistics, 240 with a 530 birth rate by family income in the US. When I was a teenager, my friends from wealthy families all had their teenage daughters on birth control. I was considered super lucky to need birth control for severe menstrual issues that made me regularly vomit, faint, and bleed for months at a time, despite being below the poverty line. On the flip side, since my school was in a lower income part of the city, it was surrounded by cheap daycares for the mothers attending my school to drop their kids at, so they could go to school all day, then pick up their kids and leave them with family to go to their after-school jobs. Many who couldn't afford the daycares would say their grandparents or another family member would watch their kids during the day and the evenings, so they could go to school and then work. Of course, there were plenty of girls who dropped out every year because they needed to watch their kids, and education was no longer a priority. The expectation of proper child rearing in the US is greater than just providing food and shelter. You are expected to provide a certain standard of living, education, and medical care to be a good parent. And because our value system is so fucked up, we expect individual nuclear families to provide it rather than the community, extended family, etc. TL:DR in America, your value to society is inversely proportional to your need to be a member of society. Because Americans view kids as a responsibility, not just extra labor or a retirement plan,